Have you ever looked at someone you raised and realized they don't love you back? Not even a little. Not even enough to offer you a towel when you're soaking, gasping, and humiliated in front of everyone. She laughed as I dragged myself out of the lake. My clothes clung to me. My pride didn't. And no one moved. Not her friends, not her husband. Not even the boy playing with a toy boat on the dock who saw me fall and just looked away. I used to braid her hair. I used to pray over her lunchbox. Now she looks at me like I'm the unpaid bill she's waiting to forget. It was late August in Petoskey, Michigan. The lake house James built himself still smelled like cedar and lemon oil. He always said summer had a sound, kids' feet slapping the dock, peach cobbler bubbling, and a screen door that never quite shut. The cobbler I brought sat untouched on the patio table. Samantha's wine, Clos du Bois, always was flowing too freely. Her friends wore white linen and expensive disinterest. The laughter floated like smoke. Light, easy, selective. I showed up with the same cobbler I'd made for 20 years. Same glass dish. Same polite smile. Same hope that maybe this time she'd see me. Margaret, she said, like naming a stain on the couch. Just a nod. Just enough to say she noticed, not enough to mean it. She joked about the house. You know, I should really get serious about this place, she said, to no one in particular. Maybe turn it into something useful. Rental income, right? Her voice had that sharp, bright tone people use when they're smiling but not joking. One of her friends snorted. Another offered to help stage it for listing. I stood quietly beside the trellis, watching the kids loop the same crooked path through the grass. Samantha's husband lit a cigar. He didn't look at me once. I stepped onto the dock. Just to breathe. Just to remember. The planks were sun-warm beneath my feet. James had built it one summer with a pencil behind his ear, and every night he'd say, "You me the lake. Nothing else matters." The water shimmered like memory. Samantha followed. Need help down the steps, she said. I turned. Number, I'm fine. She smiled. Then shoved me. I fell. No one screamed. No one gasped. The splash was sharp, sudden, like breaking a mirror. The cold wasn't in the water, it was in their silence. I kicked up, dragged myself forward. The dock seemed farther than it used to. My arms weaker, my pride heavier. Laughter. Somewhere behind me. And Samantha's voice light as bubbles. Don't be so dramatic. I pulled myself out. Dripping, shivering. Someone tossed a cocktail napkin onto the grass beside me. Like an afterthought. Like a dare. Samantha didn't even blink. She lifted her glass and sipped. The red of her lipstick left no mark. We locked eyes. And in that silence I saw it, the end of what used to be my daughter. Under my soaked blouse tucked against my wrist, the silver bracelet James gave me remained dry. He had it engraved to the only one who never let go. That's when I knew. If no one offered me a towel, I knew exactly how to dry off. She once called me Mom. Now I was just Mags, and only when her friends were watching. I still remember the first time she said it. Mags, can you grab the napkins? Just like that. No warning, no warmth. I stood at the edge of the kitchen island that day, holding a tray of lemon bars, blinking like someone had just spoken to me in a language I'd forgotten. Dolores had warned me years ago. She'll never accept you unless he's in the room. She was right. But James wasn't in the room anymore. The house was too quiet now. Except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the old cedar floors beneath my slippers. I spent that morning dusting the living room again, though I'd just done it yesterday. It still smelled like lemon oil, but that couldn't reach deep enough to scrub the silence from the walls. The photo albums were on the coffee table exactly where I'd left them. The top one still open to a picture of Samantha at 9, her arms flung wide, proud in that second-hand piano recital dress we picked together from the consignment store in town. I remembered pinning a small blue bow on her shoulder to cover a stain near the hem. She hadn't noticed. She just hugged me afterward like I was the whole world. I had the photo in my hand when I opened the jewelry box. She used to love digging through it every December, full of old cards, photo strips, faded receipts from movie nights. She called it our treasure chest. Inside, folded neatly, was the note from her 13th birthday. "Dear Mom, thank you for always clapping the loudest. I'll be better next year." She'd given me a snowflake ornament that year, made with glitter and glue and hope. I kept them all. Even now. The phone buzzed beside me. Dolores again. Voicemail. Her voice was low and careful. "I just wanted to check in. You okay out there, that girl? She'll never accept you unless he's in the room. You know that." I didn't reply. Didn't delete it either. I walked to the mantel. Still dusty. Still lined with pieces of another time. Me and James, hands muddy, planting the cherry tree out front. Samantha, maybe 15, blowing out candles while I held the cake. And one I hadn't noticed before, Samantha at brunch last summer wearing the pearl necklace I gave her. "You still wear it," I'd said, then trying not to sound surprised. She laughed. Sharp. "This thing, it's cute in a vintage way. But it's like, not real." I swallowed that. James had tried. After his stroke, he'd rewritten the will, told me he wanted me to keep control of the lake house. He said it in that soft way of his, like he was asking permission to protect me. But the aneurysm came before he could explain it to her. Before she could rage or cry or bargain. At the funeral, she wore black silk and didn't look me in the eye. 3 days later, she arrived with folders and highlighted pages. "Just sign where the flags are," she said, like we were strangers, finalizing a transaction. I signed. Grief is good at making you compliant. That night, I heard her voice float in from the kitchen. Soft. I almost missed it. "She's just a guest here now." She said it like it was a joke, like I wouldn't hear, like I wasn't meant to. I didn't say anything, didn't cry, didn't scream. I sat on the sofa with the photo in my lap, the glitter snowflake on the cushion beside me. Funny. I once thought I'd be her home. But she'd already packed me up and put me in storage. The last thing James ever said to me was, "Did you keep the second key?" And then nothing. Just the beeping machines. The waiting, the silence. I hadn't thought about that moment in weeks. But this morning, the wind off the lake had the same bite as that hospital room. Cold, clinical, too quiet. I sat in the study he used to call his thinking cave. Books still lined the walls. Spines worn. Some stacked sideways, his bad habit. The smell of paper, ink, and dust lingered like the echo of his voice. I opened the drawer he always locked. It wasn't locked now. Inside, an envelope unsealed. My name in his handwriting, soft and slanted. There was no letter inside. Only a receipt. One for a small safety deposit box in Traverse City. Dated 2 months before the stroke. And a post-it note curling at the edge. "Don't trust the face, trust the pattern." I read it 3 times, and it still felt like code. Behind me, I heard the slam of the front door. Samantha, laughing. Voices trailing her like perfume. "I'll be quick," she called out. "To grab some sweaters for the wine tour." I didn't answer. She didn't expect me to. From the window, I watched her pull down the attic stairs. She didn't hesitate, didn't ask. Just moved through the house like she owned every square inch. Maybe she did. On paper. But this room, this drawer, this quiet, still mine. I looked down at the bracelet James gave me. The silver one with the small infinity knot. He bought it after our first Christmas here. Said it reminded him of how I tucked my hair behind my ear when I thought no one was looking. I wore it every day. Even now. Even after Samantha called it tired in front of her friends. Her voice drifted down from the attic. "Can you believe she still lives here?" Another laugh. "She's like a ghost that won't leave." I stayed still. Counted to 10. And then I heard a sound I hadn't heard in months, a low whistle. One James used when something clicked in his mind. Only now it came from me. The second key. It wasn't to the house. It was to the red cedar box we buried together in the garden, the one we joked would be our time capsule. I hadn't thought about it in years. My heart raced. I slipped the envelope into my sweater. wrapped the scarf tighter around my neck, and walked outside without telling her. Leaves crunched underfoot. The garden was bare now except for the one flat stone near the lilac bush. I knelt, hands trembling. Underneath it, wrapped in oilcloth, was the box. Inside, a photo, a USB, a ring that wasn't mine, and a note, James writing again, faint but legible. If she makes you doubt what's yours, show her what was never hers. I pressed my fingers to my lips. Above me the wind kicked up. Chilly. Warning. Back in the house, Samantha's car was already gone, but her shadow still lingered. That night I watched the USB on James's old laptop. What he recorded made my stomach twist. But I didn't cry. Not yet. I sat with the screen still glowing, breathing steady when my phone lit up. A message from Dolores. Still think you're the guest. My reply was only 3 words, not for long. There was something sacred about the quiet between 3 and 5 p.m. The lake still, the birds gone hushed. And in that stillness I became invisible. That's when I watched her. Samantha thought I took naps in the afternoon. She told her friends I was starting to forget things. Let her think that. I'd spent 2 weeks collecting tiny pieces. A digital trail of every lie she dressed in pearls. The receipts from the estate account. She never thought I'd notice the withdrawals labeled consulting. The lake renovation budget, non-existent unless it involved a nail salon in Chicago or a stay at the Stay with Drake. She logged everything from her iPad, never changed the password. Still used the name of the cat we buried when she was 10. Even betrayal has a habit. I started keeping a notebook. Not for poetry like I used to, but for facts. Pages marked with dates. Quotes, amounts. Things she'd said in passing that sounded harmless until you wrote them down. Dolores offered to help. She called every other day now. Still living 2 states away, but always 1 step ahead of my courage. You're not a guest, Margaret, she said. Guests don't know where the gas shutoff is. I laughed. And then cried. Not for the first time. But maybe the last. Because once I let go of the hope that Samantha would come around, I got sharper. I started waking earlier. Walking the perimeter of the house. Checking every window, every lock. I found the original will. Tucked inside a copy of The Secret Garden like James would have done. Signed, dated. Clear as day. To Margaret Elaine Rowe, full custodianship of the property known as Lake House Number 9. My hands didn't tremble. That night Samantha returned late. Laughed in the hallway. The scent of someone else's cologne drifted behind her. I sat in the dark kitchen, mug of tea cooling untouched. She didn't see me, until I spoke. You never did return the pearl necklace. She jumped. Then smiled. Oh. That old thing, it was never yours. She shrugged. Poured herself wine. Well, everything here feels like mine now. I didn't reply. Because plans don't talk. They observe. The next morning, I called the attorney listed on the will. He remembered James. Said he'd been expecting my call for months, and then he paused. There's a clause, he said. In case the original was overridden under duress. My breath caught. Can you prove duress? There was silence. Then he asked, do you have access to James's emails? I have everything, I said. Not a boast, just a fact. That afternoon I set up a new email account. Started forwarding every file to myself. Created a folder called Reclamation. At dinner, Samantha asked if I wanted to come to her engagement party next month. I blinked. Engaged to who? She waved her hand. Oh, just a detail, you'll find out. I looked at her. Really looked. And smiled. Wouldn't miss it for the world. I didn't wear black, that would have made me look bitter. And Samantha would have loved that. I didn't wear white either. Too loud. Too naive. I chose gray. Soft, flat, forgettable gray. A color that apologized just by existing. Exactly how she liked me. The engagement party was held at Northwind Vineyards just off the lake road. Rental barn with chandelier strings, an acoustic guitarist in the corner, and too many glass flutes for the number of people who'd drink from them. Everything smelled like new wood and rosé. I brought a bottle of Clos du Bois. No one touched it. People asked who I was, more than once. Are you Samantha's aunt? Her mom then? Oh, friend of the family, friend of the family. She heard it. She was standing right there. She didn't blink. Didn't correct. Just turned slightly toward Kyle like the question had landed on someone else's shoulders. He kissed her temple. She sipped her champagne. And I became part of the furniture again. I stood by the dessert table. Mini tarts. Lemon bars with a dust of powdered sugar, just enough to fake homemade. Nothing like James used to love. He'd always hated lemon desserts. Too sharp, he said. Like joy pretending to be sweet. A man with a mustache complimented the floral arrangements. Ranunculus and eucalyptus, unexpected pairing, he told Samantha. She nodded like she arranged them herself. She hadn't. She paid someone to do it. Dolores would have laughed. Dolores, who sent me a voice memo right before I walked in. Get through this, she said. Then get out. I didn't reply, not yet. The slideshow started. Photos of Samantha and Kyle. On boats. At brunch. In Tuscany. She wore all white in every frame. Like she'd been rehearsing for this moment for years. Then a photo of James. Older. Tired. But smiling. Holding Samantha's shoulder at a family BBQ. And I saw it in the corner of the frame, me. Cut off. Blurred. Half a shoulder and a hand holding a cobbler dish. That was all I got. They toasted. To love. To beginnings. To blending families. I raised my glass too. But didn't drink. Because I hadn't come for the wine. Or the tarts. Or the seat I was barely offered. I came for that moment. Right after applause dies. Right before the next thing starts. When air hangs. And people listen. I walked up, no podium, no announcement. Just my voice. Excuse me, I said, soft enough to require silence. And the silence came. I brought something, I added. I reached into my purse. Not for a gift. For a letter. Not just any letter, James's letter. Written 2 months before he died, never mailed. Addressed to me, but about her. I found this cleaning out his drawer, I said. And I thought maybe some of you should know who she used to be. I unfolded the page. Hands steady. Voice clear. The room didn't breathe. I know you tried, Maggie, James had written. She'll always push back. That's how she tests if love holds. She told me you weren't her real mother, the letter continued, but I saw the way she cried when you fixed her recital dress with safety pins. I looked at Samantha. Her smile had frozen, still wearing that ivory silk-like armor. She won't remember the necklace I read. But she wore it every day for 2 years after you gave it. A few gasps. A chair creaked. Someone whispered. Is that real? I folded the letter again. Placed it gently on the table beside the lemon bars. Like it belonged with the rest of the curated lies. Then I walked, not fast. Not slow. Just steady. Past the bartender who avoided my eyes. Past Samantha's friend with the camera lens lowered now. And I stepped out into the October air. Where the wind didn't ask questions. Where silence finally felt like mine. I wasn't missing. I was just done explaining. The house at Hollow Grove was quieter now, not because it was empty, but because it finally belonged to no one else's expectations. Outside, the wind rolled slow through the bare trees. Inside, cinnamon steeped in black tea, and Dolores hummed while setting 2 mismatched mugs on the coffee table. You sure you don't want to open it? She nodded toward the envelope. Samantha's handwriting. Still sealed. Still sitting where I left it back in October. I shook my head. I already did the hard part, I said, and turned back to my knitting. The puzzle by the fireplace stayed half-finished. I liked it that way. Imperfect. In progress. Unapologetics. Peter had emailed that morning. All final. They can't reverse it. That was the subject line. Turns out the law doesn't reward people who fake empathy and rush paperwork. Samantha tried to contest the transfer. Said I'd manipulated James. Peter sent the court summary in PDF format. Denied. Just that one word. About time, Dolores whispered, refilling her mug with tea. I know you didn't want to fight, but you deserved that win. I didn't reply. Just pulled the knitted scarf a little tighter around my neck. Let the heat reach my bones. In the afternoon, I walked down to the community garden. Hollow Grove allowed winter crops if you kept things neat. I bent over my small plot cleared of weeds, layered with mulch, and planted winter kale with the same care I used to fix recital dresses, the same gentleness I once poured into birthday cards. A neighbor waved. Cold for digging, he said. Not if you plant things that know how to wait, I smiled. And that was that. No one asked what brought me to Hollow Grove. No one asked who Samantha was. It was the first Thanksgiving week I didn't feel like an afterthought. That evening I lit the fireplace not for warmth but for the silence it offered between each crackle. No television. No voicemail. Just the hum of a house remembering how to breathe. On the side table sat James's photo tucked into the wooden frame we'd bought at a yard sale back in Traverse City. He was smiling a little crooked, his hand resting on the arm of a lawn chair I'd long since donated. I placed my teacup beside the frame. This time I didn't rush the sip. Dolores had gone home. Peter's email was archived. Samantha's envelope still slept in the drawer. And I for once didn't feel like explaining anything. Not why I let Samantha run the house like a campaign. Not why I gave her space instead of expectations. Not even why I kept showing up until the dock incident gave me permission to disappear. People like her don't understand silence. They think it means surrender. But silence can also be structure. I pulled out the journal I hadn't written in since James's stroke. My hands shook a little as I uncapped the pen. I wrote, the inheritance isn't gone. It's been redirected to someone who finally earned it, me. Not the deed, not the furniture. The peace. The version of me who no longer asks to be invited into rooms she helped build. Outside, wind scraped the gutters. A branch tapped the window like a polite guest. In the kitchen, a timer I forgot to set beeped once, then gave up. I smiled. This was mine. Not a performance. Not a punishment. Just the sound of a woman no longer proving anything. The envelope remained sealed. If Samantha ever called, I wouldn't pick up. If she wrote again, I wouldn't read it. They told their version loudly. Now I let mine echo where they'll never find it. Some days silence isn't weakness. It's the only way to hold on to what's left of yourself. I used to believe that love, real unconditional love, could close any distance, but not everyone wants to be reached. Sometimes kindness doesn't need to be returned. It just needs to remain yours. If you've ever felt like a stranger in your own family, know this: you are not alone. I'd truly love to hear your story. Feel free to share it in the comments.